The balcony where Novak was standing and addressing the crowds usually would be seen as a very frivolous thing.
Mm.
We're not talking about the Pope on the balcony giving a papal address or a sermon, or political leaders that are on balconies like Mussolini on his little balcony in Rome. He was just standing there with the tennis racket and a tennis ball, but suddenly he's like, his presence on that balcony in Australia was almost as significant as seeing uh, Benedict outside. And the reason I say this is because period of constant hard lockdowns and curfews.
Mm.
So even to see somebody that you knew outside in public unmasked would have been a shocking thing at many moments throughout that period. But it was a shock to see somebody famous who's usually walking around unmasked permanently, in the sense that they can never be anonymous.
Right.
Someone like that overexposed. So seeing someone like that covered up when he entered the country, and then being to everybody while he was battling to stay in the country. On the other hand, we don't have people on balconies spiritual messages in this continent.
Right.
The balcony address is not it's not an emphasis here, because we don't have old Europe. We're not connected to old Europe. So generally, when we've got people of great importance in Australia talking to the public, we'll try to make it seem like they are, as they absolutely can pretend to be.
Mm.
And they will purposefully put themselves in situations where they're masking with the, I don't know, I don't want to overuse the word normal, but the pretend being average or not as important as they are in the lives of the people that are around them. So the people that,
so on the one hand, they are important, but they're performing the, I mean, this is what I did like about Benedict as Pope, that he did maintain the ceremony and therefore recognize that he is actually, as that, in that role, an incredibly important person. But it's because of the role, maybe not, it's like you're chosen to be in the role, but that Benedict did seem to have a better appreciation for the significance of the ceremony, which Francis has obviously decided he doesn't want. So he's anti-ceremony in his performances.
Yes, so that's the thing. There's this ceremonial role that you take on if you're entering certain positions. Like Benedict, he brought back the papal red shoes, right?
Right.
Was that him? Yeah. So even when he was putting on an officious garment to signal to everybody that he was carrying the weight, well, the tradition, then to contrast this, the Australian officials that were involved in the decision making around the COVID and all of the mandates were dressed in casual clothing from hiking stores. They looked, yeah, it wasn't even a case of wearing a bad suit. They weren't even wearing suits half the time, and purposefully dressing in a kind of office casual, what would you call it, like white collar casual. And I'm sure that they were doing it deliberately.
Oh, definitely.
Instantly there was no mark of wealth on them. They were signaling to everyone, going through exactly what everyone else was going through, because they were dressed like they were going for their allocated 1 hour walk at all times in public. Yeah, so we had this crisis of we had a crisis of costume, and the balcony address to everybody was interesting because it was like he was the only one who was admitting the significance of what he was doing. because this was a diplomatic problem here.
Right.
So instead of him just arriving as a tennis star to smack a ball around, he has a Serbian diplomatic pass. So suddenly the entire fiasco that was going on was a diplomatic problem. The Serbs in Australia were raging angry at the situation. And then, of course, back home in Serbia, saying Novak is like Christ. He's being persecuted like Christ. Like completely over the top Yugoslavs that are letting it fly. But I didn't see that as an overreaction. It was like they were explaining the significance while everybody down here was a naughty, a kind of childish infringement on the rules that everybody else was following, and he was in detention, like a school detention, instead of. I mean, it's a huge scandal. So there's issues. There's issues then with who we're recognizing socially significant, culturally significant. We've kind of forgotten that that balcony image was a sort of reminder that there's a contest that's always going on between the people that are in a situation that we're not very, very closely. I'm trying to form.
No, so I'm actually. It's all happening. It's all coming together. Go back to the shaman, right? The reason I was so taken with the Q shaman, Chansley, one was because Jonathan Pigeon had, on the day of January 6th, 2 years ago, said something like, I predicted that, things were going to get weird. Here's the Q shaman, right? This strange, performative oddity showing up in the Senate chamber. And I did various blog posts about it. And I've been thinking about the January 6th a lot, because we've had a lot of reminders of the anniversary in the last week, and realizing that what I was drawn to was, one, if Chansley's an actor and at another level, then I'm gonna have to rethink all of this. But what it seemed to me that he understood was the ceremonial power of what was going on. I mean, that he goes into the Senate chamber and does as prayer in his costume and such like that. But even if these guys are both CIA operatives and they're somehow actors, they are at least playing to the reality of there's powerful energies playing out at some level, and either we spend all of our time in the modern world pretending those energies don't exist, being caught by them by surprise. I mean, you're talking about, going back to Novak and the Pope, that the populace last year was in one frenzy and this year is in another, and those balconies, I was thinking when you're saying that too, nobody speaks from balconies in the United States either. I mean, the only like balcony space that has ever happened from, that now I can think of, is that terrace in the Capitol, right? So that there's something about that elevation in the architectural elevation. You could see the person speaking physically out to the crowd and saying, there's power here. There's some kind of power here. And the person on the balcony speaking to the crowd is, again, Peterson had said this, and I thought this was one of the smarter things he has said, about how the demagogue is mirroring the crowd back, right? That you're speaking, and Mussolini or Hitler or whatever, they take power from the crowd and they mirror the crowd, and there's some kind of energy going between the two of them, Vox Populi, Vox Dei. Somehow we're simultaneously in a situation where acknowledge the powers of the crowd and are the powers that be, whatever powers they are always trying to control that crowd, like the Roman emperors presumably did with their ceremony and their balconies and so forth. And the feeling of not knowing what's going to be happening, from my perspective, it's like I have no sense of any of these things. I don't know what the crowd is thinking. I don't know what the leaders are actually thinking. I don't know who is in fact in power. I mean, I read this very interesting piece. I get news clippings every day from the university news service because they do a little email, and therefore they're always quoting my colleagues, and I'm reading something about that. And there was one that was quoting John Mearsheimer, who is now famous because of his speeches on the Ukraine. And the surreal quality I had reading it was about these people at, I think it's Harvard, some kind of powerful school for business and media, politicians and stuff like that. One, I mean, I'm reading it because Mearsheimer was quoted in it saying something about, no, Steve Walt was quoted in it, and he and Mearsheimer, it's like, I don't see, blah, blah, blah. It's like, none of these people mean anything. They don't make sense. I suddenly realized I was in the presence in this article of people with levels of power and influence and money and connections I had no ghost of an idea even existed. And it was kind of terrifying, right? We get we the people get the athletes and the singers. You and I have been talking about Ye a lot, right? The comedians, the sort of players, the characters. These are not the people with any sort of power, except insofar as those guys working at that Harvard, I forget what the school is. It's a policy school. Deploy them in some way, or think they can, or want to control them, or and Pope Benedict, finding that he had to resign because as this scholar, as this theologian, as this professor from Regensburg, he had no idea, even though he'd been in the midst of these people for his whole professional life, how to deal with that level of something, right? It's like Andrew Tate seems like a comic character in this context. It's like, so what? He's been arrested. He was influencing guys. He made a lot of money, and there's the so what that he's if he's sex trafficking women, that's bad. But the feeling of not having any location for actual either authority or influence is kind of creepy. What do I have next in our slides? We have Benedict's hands holding the rosary and Tate with his cigar.
Oh.
where does power lie if it's in the rosary? I realized my little fidget toy looks stupid when I'm playing with that one, so I'm holding my rosary, right? Hold your rose. Where is the power? Where is any of this actually residing? I'm not sure it's in the people, but I'm not sure it's in these super duper wealthy people either, because if they don't control us when we wear masks or don't get their jabs, or at what level of control is it actually happening, which is why what's happening in Brazil matters, right? The degree of popular uprising, is that a few hundred people and it's nothing? I'm still astonished at how our government officials are playing out as if January 6th was a big deal. I mean, I think that is so fascinating to me that they really, really, really need that whatever kind of event it was, with, relatively minor damage and no, in fact, significant interruption in the processes of the government. Why is that still such a big deal as compared with, for example, the entire, National Guard being brought out for the inauguration 2 weeks later and nothing happening? I mean, there's a sort of surreal quality of who is in fact in control of anything. Mel is talking about tribal mass, shadow government, the invisible hand, God, Congress's passion play. Everyone. Well, this is I think where we're at this place. We've now spent our 6 months in the Ark, sailing around looking for significance and patterns and such, and then I get a cold and suddenly there aren't any left. No more patterns, no more meaning. The Pope is dead. Andrew Tate's a fake.
Doom.